If you've been following the channel, then you know that we've been counting down the best horror movies of all time, year by year. We just finished the 80s, perhaps the best decade for the genre, and while we did indeed cover the vast majority of its greatness, there were a few pictures that fell between the cracks. And this brings us to the film we will be discussing today, 1988's The Serpent and the Rainbow, a deeply underappreciated genre effort from the late, great Wes Craven. Why didn't this movie make our official best of the year list? Well, because 1988 was an insanely stacked year for horror.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
We had Pumpkinhead, Child's Play, The Blob, and so much more. Though the fact that this movie didn't make the list does provide a silver lining. Now we get to talk about it at length with its very own video. Enjoy!
This is the Dargent Show.
Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it!
Craven came to the project fresh off the disappointment of the 1986 flop Deadly Friend, a dialogue-heavy sci-fi thriller that was cut up and refashioned by the studio and is something more horrific and befitting what audiences expected from the guy who made Nightmare on Elm Street. The Serpent and the Rainbow is one of those, quote, based on a true story horror films. This time, the source material is Wade Davis's book, The Serpent and the Rainbow, a Harvard scientist's astonishing journey into the secret societies of Haitian Voodoo, zombies, and magic, which posited a scientific basis for the legend of the undead. And while we're not going to get into the validity of the book, we could definitely say that the film is quite disturbing. It all begins when self-important American Dr. Dennis Allen travels to Haiti on behalf of a pharmaceutical corporation to investigate a powdered drug used in Haitian Voodoo rituals that turns people into zombies.
What do you know about zombification?
Pardon me?
Zombification. The process of making zombies, the living dead.
Just what I've seen on the Late Show.
Allen embarks in a violent and at times surreal journey to gain access to this drug. But what he discovers will change his life forever. He gets mixed up in a game where he is the pawn in the middle of voodoo priests, corporate government officials, and his own sanity. In the end, he must decipher what is science and what is something else.
Now, if you don't like the word zombie, you can choose another word.
The opening scene shows us a beautifully crafted black and red coffin having its final polish before being taken at gunpoint from the yard by a trio of casually dressed men. From the outset, the music really sets the mood. Composer Brad Fiedel gives us a modern interpretation of hypnotic voodoo drumming with swells of synth keyboard and a twist of Italian horror soundtrack. We catch up with the stolen coffin as it is set alight and paraded through the streets. This burnt offering is dumped outside the clinic where a doctor calls the time of death, holding a mirror to the deceased's nose and sticking a needle under his eye to make sure.
Stop! Stop!
Shown to us through the eyes of a condescending and materialistic American, Haiti is presented as an exotic land of magic and danger. As with older zombie films such as White Zombie and Plague of the Zombies, The Serpent and the Rainbow uses a magician as the central baddie.
This country lives on the edge, Dr. Allen.
This line is spoken by Captain Dargent Peytraud to our film's protagonist. Peytraud is a corrupt police official, black magician, and in turn the film's primary villain. One could make the argument that he is simply a proxy for forces greater than himself. As the leader of the Tante Mokae, Peytraud is a cipher for the authority of Haitian dictator Jean-Claude Baby Doc Duvalier. Peytraud himself does not have authority except that which is derived from his position in Duvalier's regime, and his role as a Bokor or black magician, again, Peytraud is merely a vessel for the mysterious spiritual powers of Haiti.
This country lives on the edge.
Like Peytraud himself, the statement we just heard has two distinct meanings. In the context in which it is given, it is a reference to Haiti's tenuous political climate. Peytraud uses the threat of political collapse to justify his brutal methods as acts of patriotism, and political turmoil in Haiti as the backdrop against which the film is set. The unintended meaning of the statement is far more relevant to the main ideas of the film, however. Haiti is a country living on the edge between the real world of politics and poverty and the supernatural world of voodoo, zombies, and spirits.
In the middle of all this, I couldn't get my mind off the zombie, Christophe. Why would they do such a thing to him? Why would they make anybody a zombie?
While The Serpent and the Rainbow is a zombie film, those expecting a full-on horror tale might be disappointed. As previously alluded to, its versions of zombies are akin to the earliest iterations, preceding the George A. Romero Night of the Living Dead incarnation. Before Romero ushered in a complete overhaul of the concept, the first usage dates back to 1819 and is of West African origin. Later, in 1929, W.B. Seabrook covered the voodoo zombie concept in his book The Magic Island. It's this version, quite literally the undead, which The Serpent and the Rainbow explores. Craven indeed employs horror with restraint throughout the film, only progressing to overt scare moments in the film's second half. The scene of Alan trapped in a coffin filling with blood, the film's horrific set piece, comes within the context of a dream, making it more an intriguing visual than a source of terror. More of the film is dedicated to Peytraud's earthly powers than his supernatural ones. Thus the film is often a political thriller with horror elements. The Killing Fields meets The Exorcist, if you will. When the film makes the transition to horror exclusively in its final act, it does so almost satirically. Direct nods are made to Craven's A Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, and Peytraud's abilities are quite reminiscent of Freddy Krueger's, such as his power to enter Alan's dreams.
You dreamt of me and of the grave. I know because I was there, and I can be there every time you close your eyes.
Peytraud is given his ironic comeuppance by Alan in his slasher-influenced finale in a battle that somehow feels less essential than the political rebellion against which it is set.
What do you want? I want to hear you scream.
Heather Wixon wrote in her retrospective review of the film, "There's no denying that when it came to many of his films, Craven was probably the horror genre's greatest metaphysical explorer, someone who is very driven by investigating ideas that feel very real, yet extend far beyond our reality. Things like the power of dreams, the existence of the human spirit, the concept of faith, and whether or not there are forces of magic at work in this world are concepts Craven have explored in a variety of his works. But in The Serpent and the Rainbow, we watch as all these themes collide with the very real-life horrors of Haiti and the political corruption that has ravaged its residents. It's also worth pointing out that Craven never utilizes the religion of Haitian Voodoo as a punchline. There are no Weekends at Bernie's 2 type of shenanigans here.
Get on up, get on up. The voodoo, the voodoo.
In this film, voodoo is just as valid of a belief system as Christianity, Catholicism, or even the scientific method. There is a reverence shown, and it's clear that Craven isn't here to use voodoo to elicit thrills and chills. He's genuinely digging into what happens to the human soul after death, and whether or not there are supernatural forces at play in this world that go beyond what most of us could possibly comprehend. It's really surprising that there aren't more voodoo-based horror movies, unless the Chucky movies count. Do they count? Yeah, they count. Why not?
What a crock.
The Serpent and the Rainbow is a classic horror movie in the true sense of the word classic. It harkens in the past to an age where overrated frights and intense gore was not necessarily a part of the genre. If you look back at some of the traditional horror flicks from the beginning of the 20th century and, indeed, from literature across the eras, the concept of horror was more meaningful when it was the muddled nightmarish fears that set the infrastructure of the storyline. While the modern horror scene employs a lot of the fright factor and a lot of the bloodshed, which for sure have their place, the true classics are the ones that stay close to those far deeper fears we all, or most of us, share.
Don't let them bury me. I'm not dead.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to share your thoughts on this somewhat forgotten film in the comment section below.